Hi, I'm Dan, 36, gay, married, and welcome back to my video dissertation on the show that has me in a chokehold and won't let me go, Heated Rivalry. In this series, we'll be going episode by episode through season 1 and discussing the character development, moments that broke me, those that healed me, and all of the incredible tiny nuances that made me fall hard for this version of queer love. And today, we are going to go through episode 6, The Cottage. This has been a long time coming. I have been kind of sad to actually do this video because that means that we are done with this series as far as season 1 goes. I believe they have started filming season 2, but we're not going to get it for about another year. But because it's the finale, I thought we should celebrate a little Prosecco, and we're just going to kind of settle in. For those of you who are new here, a couple disclaimers up at the top. I've not read the books yet. I fully intend to do so the second that I finish this series. So I may say some things that are covered in the book, but not in the show. That's totally fine. And the way I usually structure these is I kind of define my own chapters or kind of key moments throughout the episode and link to the actual timestamp in the show. So if you want to kind of watch along, you can do that. And for episode 6, which is hands down my favorite episode, the key chapters are MVP, easing into it, playing house, settling in, a life together, love drunk, the parents, and into the sunset. All right. Go to my couch this summer. I'm coming to the cottage. So we start off with the award for MVP going to our boy Scott, who obviously in last episode took a big leap of faith after winning the cup and called Kip down onto the ice and kissed him coming out, obviously. And he has won the MVP award. We get to see then Kip at the local bar with all of his friends. We're continuing this color story where the bar is kind of lit up in red, potentially symbolizing love. And it also can represent, obviously, the admirals. They've got the red jerseys, and it's almost this full circle moment of kind of what we had seen. I believe was that in episode 3? It must have been. Yeah, back in episode 3 when we first see Kip kind of being infatuated with hockey, mainly just with Scott, and sitting in that exact bar with that cast and crew, kind of going through the ups and downs of does this guy like me? Does he not? Okay, I think I love him, but I'm having to kind of lie to hide myself for him. What do I do? Blah, 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 which is all the winding ups and downs to kind of get us, obviously, to what we saw at the end of last episode. And I'm not entirely sure what the timeline is now for this. When we left off episode 5, when we left off episode 3, I was under the impression, obviously, that, Kip was going to go away to school and that relationship was not working out. But then we see the last episode that, obviously they're there at the game. He seems down, so indicating to me that they have not rekindled their relationship, even though he was there. But then Scott kind of knows he's there. So I'm not entirely sure, how much time has elapsed from him standing outside of the bar for his birthday when Scott chose not to go in, to then him kissing him on the ice. And then this obviously is just kind of shortly after that. But without saying it, Jacob and team are signaling to me as a viewer that they're back together. Hopefully, and now that he can be out, they can, they can really date in the way that they both want to, but Kip really needed to. And, Scott's beginning his speech, and I believe, and I thought it was an interesting choice that Kip wasn't actually present for his speech. A couple people have been saying that they think it was just a shot choice because of, they filmed this so quickly and on such a tight budget that, there's no one in this auditorium that Scott's talking. And so if they had, shown Kip, for example, like in the crowd, you would have, have all those doubles and the backup folks there. But he kind of kicks it off and is talking and, saying how this was his lifelong dream, winning the cup. Very witty banter in the speech but something else happened that night that kind of eclipsed the Admirals winning the cup. And that obviously is him coming out. And you get a couple people from the fake crowd and kind of woo, 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 which was great. Again, continuing on the theme of like waiting for the shoe to drop, a silent audience to him making that joke, right, could indicate that while the people in the crowd on the ice cheered for him, maybe it's not being received the same way inside kind of this MLH bubble. But we get, again, those subtle cues that there is love and support in the building with him as he's talking about this. Another thing that is interesting, and I think I might have mentioned this in my deep dive for episode 5, but it's funny that he is such a secretive person, and that he chose in that moment, and I don't even know if chose is the right word. Like basically he was just driven by everything in him to do it in that public way. And if you had, putting my Una hat on, if there was a PR team behind this decision, which obviously there wasn't, you would imagine that would get you some great press, right? Or at least a lot of press. I don't know. Good, bad, and the other way. And that there could be some monetization aspect of it, of doing it in such a public way that way, that would kind of cheapen the emotion and the experience. And it's funny just even hearing him say in his speech, in a ridiculously public way, I came out, which is not like me. I'm so secretive. And it almost feels like he had to do it that way almost to like counteract how secretive he is and how good he's been at keeping things close. It's like, this is your big swing and you just have to go with it, because if you don't, and then let's say even if he had made the decision that he wanted to come out but didn't make that proclamation, you could see him getting back that night and reading articles about like how great it was and he's such a perfect role model for the sport and blah, 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 and then scaring himself back into the closet. And it was like, this is your one shot and you just have to go. And he did. Oh my God, it is so warm in our apartment. I literally have an ice pack that I'm going to sit on. Oh, that's cold. It's like 70 degrees. And for Minneapolis this time of year, it's unheard of. And our building, we have a special turnover date for heat to AC for some reason. And we don't have that yet. So I'm hot. Also, I'm always really bad about remembering to do this, but if you haven't subscribed and you like this stuff, hit the subscribe button. It helps me a ton. If you like it. We've had very, very healthy conversations in the comments, which I really appreciate. And if you guys wouldn't mind hyping the video for content creators like me that are smaller in terms of like subscriber count, it helps the algorithm basically show this video to new people so we can kind of like build the community even further. I would really appreciate it. All right, I'm done with my YouTuber pitch. Then we get Scott kind of talking about how, while he has been super secretive, or not secret, he has kept his private life very private. Kind of what he's seen and heard over the last couple of weeks has kind of shown him that actually it's more important that he continues to be vocal about it, or is vocal about it. And he references, young fans reaching out and, how much it meant for them that he did come out in that way. And I think in a really, really beautiful way, calls out the struggle and in the reality of what kind of kept him in the closet, right? That he loved hockey. He says it was his whole life, but that early on in the culture, the hockey culture in general, calling people an F word and blah, 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 blah is in a derogatory sense. As a teen, he already started feeling different because of that. And I think that's for almost all people that are gay or queer and have this like coming out process. This is a shared experience. I think for most of us, probably more heightened in that kind of athletic, hyper masculine world. And he goes on to kind of talk about how when you're hiding a secret, it is completely exhausting. It is consuming every ounce of your conscious and subconscious energy throughout the day to make sure that I'm not walking like I'm gay. I'm not talking like I'm gay. I'm not looking at any of my teammates, as we're changing, whether you're looking to look or not, right? Constantly just being aware, on guard. And, I'm not an athlete, definitely not a professional athlete. And so I obviously didn't have the same experience as he did, but I do vividly remember just the mental load all the time of keeping up the appearance, albeit I don't know that I was straight, and to, you end up almost in a way overthinking it so much that it can do the opposite. It almost can, like, those knee-jerk reactions to questions or circumstances almost draw more attention to the question. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I do remember multiple times where I was like, you didn't need to say that. And now you've actually put the spotlight on yourself by even stating the thing that you said. And he continues just to be super honest and said, it's also incredibly lonely. And I think this section of the speech is so beautifully done because it sits perfectly in the middle. It's not letting the hockey world, off scot-free and being like, no, it was totally fine. And now was the right time for me and blah, blah, blah. But he's also not calling anyone specifically out. He's coming at it from a lens instead of this is what happened to me. Rather, this was my lived experience without being antagonistic. It's meant to be like gently provocative of like, hey, I'm really glad that you all have shown me the support that you have in this moment. But I want also just like to be the voice again for those young athletes that had reached out to him. Like, I also have to kind of say what it is. And he kind of beautifully then crescendos into obviously giving Kip his flowers for being, the amazing person he is and giving him the strength to actually do it. And again, just in a beautiful sentiment, it's like fear is incredibly powerful. We saw Scott's fear. It was very evident in episode 3. And he says, but then I found the one thing that's more powerful, which obviously is his love for Kip. And he kind of wraps up by, gives a shout out to his team and coach, because without them, he wouldn't be as successful as he is, but calls out Kip by name and says he also shares the honor with him and kind of ends it with right down the barrel, I love you. Yeah, it was just a incredibly like no notes speech. It was succinct. It hit all of these different points and felt incredibly authentic to the experience and to obviously what this series is meant to be driving. And it's really cool that without knowing it, or at least not knowing it on the same scale, this show is doing the same thing. I know multiple people on the cast and the executive team have said that they've been reached out to by athletes in the closet saying, how much it means to them. It's also done a really cool thing where it's kind of resurfaced stories of athletes that have already come out in different sports like Gus and others. And I think really propelled, at least from like a social media standpoint, some other kind of coming out stories that I would assume probably would never have hit my feed there was NRL, AFL, which Australian rules football. Mitch Brown came out as bi. I think someone subsequently after him also came out that was from the Australian football, aka rugby, that came out as gay. There was some overseas basketball player who also came out. It's just been, I feel like it has risen a lot of these things kind of to the top of our feeds and made us aware. And I've seen so many posts to come across my feed of, you know, this version of me, if they had had this story available to them, and it's pictures of them as kids, you know, playing whatever sport they played, pro, semi-pro eventually, you wouldn't understand like what that would mean. And I can only believe that that's true, right? I've seen myself in multiple aspects of the show. I've seen like parts of me in Shane, parts of me in Ilya, good, bad, and the otherwise for sure. But I can't imagine being a professional athlete or semi-pro or whatever and getting this storyline. It'd be like, you know, it'd be like me as a kid, you know, wanting to be a doctor and seeing a storyline that like was Grey's Anatomy instead of hockey, right? It would just hit so much closer to home, and there would be such a deeper parallel that like I can appreciate from a more broad standpoint of like coming out and, you know, being scared, but definitely not the same as it is, you know, still is very much so today for professional athletes, and, you know, reaching the peak of your career and having people love you and having all of these sponsorships and blah, 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 but still then having to like hide who you are in order to, or at least or the perception of, in order to keep that all, right? So yeah, absolutely no notes. I loved that, and I'm so glad that that's how we started this episode. It was kind of like the perfect front cover for this just unbelievable episode. All right, now we are transitioning into easing into it. We have a very nervous Shaney boy sitting in his car, which Ilya will have questions about in a second here, just nervously drumming away on his steering wheel. Eyes kind of like darting back and forth. We're getting this background music that's like has a faster beat, like trying to mimic his heart rate. Like, not only is he nervous about being seen, about Ilya being recognized and being like, why the hell are you at this regional airport in Canada? This is a big difference in the way that their relationship has happened thus far. And I love this shot of Ilya walking up to the car. Of course, again, this color theory, all black, but we're looking, it's shot as if through the side mirror as he's walking up to the car to get in. Also kind of funny, I'm assuming there was probably some logistics of Shane being like, this is my license plate or something, but he just like doesn't even say anything, opens up the trunk, puts his bag in there, and we get, you know, a truly Ilya moment here. The music cuts out and he goes, is this a Jeep? And Shane immediately goes into like defensive mode of like, what? No, it's British. It's great in the snow. It's practical. Which just is like, if we were to distill these two characters down, like this 30 seconds is a pretty good indicator of who they both are as people. But it is like buddy energy. It's not like, hey, I missed you. Hey, you know, because usually once they're kind of back together, they can't keep their hands off one another. Obviously, they're still in public. They're in a parking lot. But we're already kind of setting up the kind of intentional awkwardness that would come with a scenario like this. We get a little loon call at 4:58. And from the high-paced heart rate awkwardness with the music, we cut to, we're kind of on the road now. And we get this French song, which I am not going to try and pronounce because I will do a horrible job. But we're getting softer shots of each of them, and the lyrics are, "It's always warm with us," our beauty, this is translated, "Beauty hurts that of the sun, we exist now, that's it. We dance, we laugh, we play. Tonight I found my beauty again in your hands." We're kind of setting up, obviously we're in Canada, French Canadian, but it's a softer tone as we begin to kind of like defrost a little bit, and we just get them both kind of like staring straight ahead. Shane kind of breaks the ice a little bit and is like, "Hey, are you hungry? It's, going to be another 2-hour drive." Ilya's fine. We get to see the first kind of peak of the Shane that we'll see, I guess, throughout the rest of the episode, where, he's, trying to sell Ilya a bit on like, I think you're going to like it. It's really relaxing. And Ilya making a joke, which he does, is like, "Oh, that's what we're going to do. We're going to relax." And Shane's kind of like figured out how to I think he's figured Ilya out a little bit by now and is like, I'm not going to take that personally, but I'm actually going to say, I'm going to respond to you and say the thing that, I hope that that's what we're going to do. I would like to relax with you. And again, continuing to delineate what we have seen in earlier episodes where it was totally all physical, or at least that's what they both kind of wanted to portray, to no, listen, bro, I've been waiting to date you for feels like 15 years. Okay. Yeah, I would like to relax. Of course, the intimacy will happen, but already kind of setting the tone that this isn't just an extended F session. I want to actually spend time with you for once. And the shot of Ilya as Shane's, rambling about groceries and stuff, you can tell he's kind of okay, not in a bad way, but he's kind of recognizing, I think, maybe what his instinct would be usually in this moment, to again pull into the physical, pull into the joking, pull into whatever, and is kind of sitting in the moment, albeit somewhat awkwardly. But you okay? Sorry, I have a very medicated dog. He had unexpected surgery the other day and is high on quite a few pain meds. You okay? I don't know, and I don't think he knows. Where was I? Yeah, you can just kind of feel him sitting in it, even if it is uncomfortable. And he kind of cuts Shane off and kind of goes there and just says, "Thank you for inviting me." And, the softer side of Ilya we haven't seen with Shane necessarily, except for that big burst moment kind of in the hotel room. And so again, as someone who Ilya has made very nervous throughout the season in terms of him recoiling or pulling away, I think it was really important that he did this, albeit so small, because it shows us as the viewers, but also Shane, I hear you, right? I heard what you said, and I'm going to try and reflect that back to you and, demonstrate that he's excited to be there. And without saying it, also excited to relax with Shane and blah, blah, blah. And after a brief pause, we get Shane kind of repaying the favor. "I'm glad that you're here." And then we get, honestly, one of my favorite moments from Ilya, where he's like, "Yeah, same," but also kind of terrified too. Yeah. And it's kind of the perfect statement with this nervous body language and leaning on kind of the gimmicks that they use as part of their character. And it's just genuine, no frills on it, just saying what he's feeling, which is a request that Shane is going to make here in a couple minutes. And almost as if he needs to kind of check a couple boxes before he can fully relax, Shane asks, did anyone recognize you at the airport? Ilya said he doesn't think so. And doing a little bit of like world building, Shane's like, we won't have to worry about anything. The cottage is super private, alerting that like the risk is now gone or done, right? It was get through the airport, get on the road together. Now we're basically safe from the public eye. And Ilya just like immediately clocks him like, oh, not even your parents are going to stop by, which foreshadowing. And our boy Shane. I'm assuming this is how Rachel wrote it, if not Jacob and whoever writers to that. But the fact that he chose a silent retreat as the reason is just like hilarious, but so Shane. And the way Ilya reacts gives me confirmation that some of the hypothesis and theorizing that I've been doing throughout the other episodes, that like he loves Shane for Shane. It's not that he loves most of Shane and then there's these like one-off weird things, but like watching him fold his clothes and, calling him quote unquote boring, which actually when we translate that into Ilya speak is safe. And the way he responds to this silent retreat move is just like 100% confirmation. And, Shane's like, what, does that sound fake? Because Ilya laughs and he goes, yes, it would if it was anyone but you. And in that moment, he just reaches down and grabs Shane's hand. And you're just like, yes, 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 yes. We're moving forward. The boys like love each other for exactly who they are. And he just like intentionally grabs his hand, puts it in his lap, and they ride off for the rest of their journey to the cottage. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this on the live rewatch of this episode, but I totally get that whole sequence of, okay, you guys have known each other for X amount of time. You guys have hooked up multiple times. Why is this weird? Why is there an awkwardness there? And it's because they've never spent time together like this, right? In med school, I was dating someone who lived on the West Coast, and I was in the Caribbean for med school. And like, even though we talked all the time and texted and FaceTimed and, blah, 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 the first time I went to visit him, it's like being physically next to one another. It was like, I'm excited, but I don't know you, but I do know you through like these digital exchanges that we've had. And I remember he picked me up. It was like the tiniest little podunk airport. And it was kind of like, you're building it up so much in your brain and you're so excited and you're so, like ready for me in that moment, like to jump on him and, actually get the physical touch and all that sort of stuff that you can't do over the phone. But it did take a little bit to like, well, what your brain's like, well, what do we talk about? Well, what do we do? It's like, well, you had no problem nonstop texting like a million fucking things a day. And it is just like that first time when something is different, it just takes a second to like settle in and be comfortable with that level of like, I don't know, intimacy, I guess. Brought back some memories, seeing that kind of like awkwardness and driving together and then finally like breaking the seal and whatever. So we pull up to the cottage. Shane, being the wonderful human that he is, goes and grabs Ilya's bag as Ilya's kind of like, taking it all in. And of course, Ilya's like, I can carry my bag. And Shane's like, oh, with your ribs like that? And I know I've talked a lot episode over episode of like the power struggle dynamic between them in their relationship or situationship or whatever the hell. And that early on, Ilya kind of held the reins a lot. We've shifted quite a bit here where Shane's, taking more of these things and almost just like settling into himself with Ilya, and just the thought of him carrying his bag in And Ilya being like, I can do it. I don't care about my ribs. And he's like, no. Reminds me a lot of me. We have like a running joke, me and my husband, if he wants to, do something for me or whatever. I always say, I'm an independent man that don't need no man. I, for whatever reason, am fairly adverse to help. Yep. It's probably a good way to put it. Perfect example. I broke both of my arms playing indoor soccer a couple years ago. I was running, and you know how they have like the tarp thing, and then you're supposed to have foam padding and then the wall. I was running, crossed a shot, and went up to like stop myself, assuming that there was foam, and my hand kept going and it found the concrete wall, locked out both elbows. And instead of calling him to come get me, I drove home 25 minutes. And then the next day, despite him asking and or threatening me to go go to the doctor, I told him just to go into work. And then this was around COVID times, because I had to figure out how to get a face mask on. With 2 broken arms, got an Uber and went to the hospital to get x-rays and pain meds. And they gave me 1 sling, which to me then said, I guess this isn't important because both of my arms are broken. But I can say that I have, in the last probably like 2 years, started to give in to some of those things. But it took a long time for me to accept the help. So I feel you, Ilya. Also, Shane is just giving like full on like dad mode right now, which I love. And it reminded me in the sequence, it was either episode 4 or episode 5. Yeah, I can't remember which one. But we have a shot of Shane looking through the social media posts about him and Rose. And one of the comments is like, he looks like he would carry her bags and her life or something like that. And then we have a parallel shot of Ilya looking at the same comment. Here we go. They were the social media poster was right, just wrong person, but right vibe. And they kind of walk in, and Ilya's just trying to take it all in. He, knows Shane well enough that pops his shoes off and makes a joke about his real estate fetish, which, hey, can relate. And Shane's instinct is that by Ilya making that statement, he's saying like, oh, you found a good house to buy. And Shane like retorts, well, I had it built. And it's like, I know. And we will touch on it in a little bit, but I've seen the yoga video, bro. We get our boy, Shane, thumbs in his pockets. He just makes me laugh with how he kind of like clams up in these things, because we were just in the car and everything was chill, but now it's like we've changed settings. And so now I'm going to get nervous again and, start talking about things like the well and that there's good water. And again, I'm giving him shit, but I think most of the times that they come together at one another's places, there's this like moment of, are we going to sit and talk? Are we going to do this? Or are we just going to get right to it? And we clearly have not yet come over that hurdle with the 2 of them. And we get a shout out to, and I bought you Cokes, again, returning kind of that favor of like, I knew that was your favorite, so I got it. Kind of like how Ilya had ice cold ginger ale for Shane at his house. Ooh, they're in love. And I can only imagine that from Ilya's point of view, this is one of those moments where you're just like, hard eyes emoji. Here's my super adorable, kind of awkward man who invited me up to his favorite place in the world, and we're here alone, blah, 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 blah. And as Ilya's walking up to Shane, he's looking at him and just kind of like fixated on his lips. And to kind of bring Shane into the moment, Ilya does his little hand grab on his face and finally kisses him. And in contrast to some of the other hookup scenes that we've seen with them, it feels like Jacob and team made a choice to kind of bring some like levity and reality to this moment where instead of, for example, when Shane went over to Ilya's house the first time and Ilya just very smoothly picks him up and puts him on the counter and blah, blah, blah. The joys of YouTube magic. I filmed almost the rest of this entire episode deep dive, but when I went to change my camera battery, I paused the recording on my mic and forgot to turn it back on. So this is actually Dan from the next day. And not that I'm mad that I have to rewatch the episode, because I'm not. When you film hours and hours and hours of stuff, it's good when the audio is also there. Okay, tangent over. We are going to jump back in. So what I kind of love about this next sequence and choice is, when we last saw Ilya and Shane at Ilya's house in Boston, he kind of like picks him up, puts him on the counter, kind of these like very dominant Rico Suave type moves that are, of course, like, hot and whatever, but they're a little too like perfect and performative. And I loved the choice of, and kind of like the levity of them, like, obviously, they're so excited to be back together. They kind of bump into the lamp on their way to the couch, and Ilya's like, whoa, and goes kind of tumbling backwards, which is just like a nice contrast to the kind of like, again, dominant, somewhat like performative beginnings to some of their hookups previously. And I think that failure, that breaking of character, or that breaking of kind of the perfect start to whatever, actually kind of helps like break the tension between the two of them, and almost like sets, like, out of the gate breaks the expectation that this is going to be that like storybook thing, and that actually we're going to be fumbling through some of these things together, because this is real life. Right? This is, for the first time, not some orchestrated hookup that like has been somewhat planned out for months and months and months and blah, 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 but rather like them trying to figure out what like real life feels like or could feel like. And like, that's life. That's dating. You can have all of these like super smooth cinematic ideas in your head of like how this date's going to go, how this thing's going to happen, how blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, shit happens all the time. And as someone who's been in a relationship for 10 years now, there's a whole lot more of realism than these like portrayed, overly thought out or suave intimate moments. And so again, they're kind of like, easing into each other, into this new reality that they're trying to build. And with that, we are going to transition into playing house. As they're kind of getting into it, Shane just kind of stops for a second and is like, hey, just like a heads up, I might not last that long. It's been a while. And he's like, since the last time that they were together. And Ilya catches Shane completely off guard by saying same, which obviously he would have expected Ilya to have continued to hook up with people. They are not exclusive. They're not dating at this point in terms of actually like checking off the milestones. But Shane just like immediately erupts with like a giant smile on his face, and it's like, really? And it's kind of like that first signal that, I mean, I guess Ilya choosing to come to the cottage is a big step, a big moment, no question. But this almost gives Shane the first like signal that Ilya is genuinely only interested in him. And not that he as of the last 2 weeks or whatever is genuinely interested in just him. But I believe they even say like that was months ago. And so even from that time, which was clearly had shifted to something very different between the two of them, you can just see Shane like processing that real time, and they're starting to put like the framework around what will end up being the relationship for the two of them. And I mean, I don't know, I won't speak for everyone. I'll speak for myself, and I think this is a fairly normal pattern of things where it's like I'm talking to someone, right? 90% or probably more of people under the age of 40 have experienced dating on the apps, and you're just kind of like casting a wide net and talking to people. And so you're just talking. You first meet up with them then, and maybe you're hooking up or going on dates or doing whatever. And as you begin to get more into one another and more, understand each other better, you kind of move to like, hey, I actually want to put most of my eggs or all of my eggs in like this basket. Like, let's just be exclusive. Like, I only want to go on dates kind of with you and see where this goes. And then you transition to like the formality of it of like, okay, I actually want to like put a title on this. I want to be boyfriends or whatever that is. And even like for me, granted, it was like 10 years ago, but that was something that my husband and I navigated of like, I was ready to be boyfriends fairly early on. And we both did. I give him shit. There was a fairly even pace, at least with that. But it was just funny to watch these moments and watch them, especially over the breadth of this episode, kind of evolve from, at least on paper, I think the emotional depth and the longing and I'm even going to call it love at this point that they have for one another. They've never said it, right? They've never expressed it. They've never like allowed each other to explore that. And so truly they are in the like on paper hookup buddies that are navigating their way towards boyfriends. And I laughed a little bit when Shane came back and was like, really? Me neither. It's like, well, I would have assumed that. Not that Shane obviously couldn't go and hook up with people and, do whatever. But I got the sense the whole season that like he was wanting, maybe not ready for, but wanting this with Ilya, and has been more in the mindset of like just focused on him outside of obviously the rose blip. And as we see Shane do often, his mind is just going like a million miles a minute, and he's digesting it, putting all the dots together, and jumps into a line of questioning as he does. Like, this is his pattern. And, he stops Ilya and says, I have an idea. Why don't we just be honest with each other, say what we're actually thinking, and maybe how we actually feel. And it was almost like the baby step that he could take with Ilya on that, of just like, let your thoughts come out. And it would be great if you could like tell me how you're feeling. But even if you can just say your thoughts, then at least I have something to grab onto and try to better understand in X, Y, and Z. I think somewhat trying not to scare Ilya off. He's already demonstrated, in the car ride there that this experience is somewhat terrifying for him because this is totally outside of his comfort zone. And he's just kind of like rubbing his cheek, and Shane's just kind of like rubbing his cheek, and Ilya smiles and gives an honest answer. And he goes, I will try. And then reverts us back to, hey, there's a thing that we were about to do. Like, can we, throw a joke on top? But at least we got that like genuine moment from him responding back to Shane and in saying, yes, I will try to meet you there. And what I love about it is that he's not recoiling. He's not walking it back, but rather he's leaning in and he's saying yes, with very reasonable caveats that like, hey, the subtext is I don't do that. Right? Like it's very evident I don't, but I will try. And if you've added a couple words at the end of that sentence, I'll try for you. And that really kind of unlocks, I think, for them a way to drop their guards even further with one another. And what that unlocks is this like childlike playfulness and like genuinely goofy side of both of them, but really of Shane. We have seen little snippets of Ilya in that, not necessarily with Shane directly, But, think back to the pool scene with the kids, right? And we got to see that childlike wonder come out of him, or him with Svetlana as joking like WWE pile drive in the bed. We've seen bursts of that from Ilya. I can't think of anything like that with Shane. And the way he takes this, flips it, is then going into this like hotel staff joke and leading, back to the room, was just so awesome to see, because it's like, that's who an uninhibited Shane must be. And I don't even know that he's let himself be that unbridled, even with like his parents or his other friends in life, because he is who he is, and he lives in his head, and he thinks too much and is concerned about many things. But that just playful, uninhibited version was just amazing to see. And I think Ilya very much responded to that. And he, as they're walking up the stairs, he's smiling and looking around like these boys are just happy, which is all we've wanted. And of course we get, Ilya being like, I know how the hotel staff likes to be treated after all these years. She does. And then it was funny, the choice for Shane, and it probably is just reflexive, but for him to go and grab the remote for the blinds and start closing them. Because the whole way here, the whole reason that they're going to the cottage, the reason why he's lying about being on a silent retreat and all this stuff, is that this is complete privacy. That was the cell, right? That he gave Ilya in the car. It's completely secluded and private and blah, blah, blah. And so it was funny to see him go and like try to shut the blinds. And Ilya just has this like visceral reaction, instantaneous reaction to him seeing that the blinds were coming down. And he gets up, and you get this playful little grab of the remote, sends it back up and chucks it over his shoulder. It's the look on his face is immediately on rewatching brought me back to the phone call scene that we'll see later in this episode. That kind of like mischievous little playful side of him, which like in my brain I can only picture as the like smiling purple demon emoji, and he just kind of like flicks it over his shoulder. And I think that you can read that as him, being flirty, like maybe enjoying the thrill of like a potentially voyeuristic whatever. I don't think that's it at all. I think that what it is actually a way, and not that he's doing this consciously, but I think subconsciously signaling he doesn't want to hide what he and Shane have happening. There's a level of comfort and kind of like carefree about the way that they are interacting in this kind of new safe space with one another, and especially with the loss of his dad and him cutting ties with his brother, he's lighter and less burdened and ready to let his mind wander and think about, what could this be a thing? Is this something we could have? Is this level of transparency in the cards for the first time maybe ever in his life? And really, it's the beginnings of playing house, right? We cut to after their time together, and Ilya just struts out in the funniest outfit. I burst out laughing when he came through those doors in that knit polo and these extremely long shorts. Let's say that's probably all he's wearing, and he's very comfortable. And the way that he comes through that door and walks over to Shane tells us everything we need to know about how comfortable he is here at the cottage with Shane. I mean, think about all of the first time awkwardness of being at someone's house and, oh, hey, where did you go? can I go into the fridge? Can I blah, 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 blah? It's all completely gone. He's walking through like he owns the place. And it's just because I think he is so light and comfortable. And obviously walks over to our boy Shane, who is giving very much Canada in his plaid shirt, grilling up some burgers. And in that moment, you can feel this like quiet conflict in the way that Ilya is all the way over here, like comfortable, happy, loving life, having a great fucking time. And then Shane, even though he's like going through the motions of like playing house, for example, making food for them, he is lost mentally somewhere. He is consumed by something that is not happening in front of him. And, you know, even Ilya gives him a little bit of shit for like, why are you making so many burgers? And Shane is almost like on autopilot where he's like, well, the recipe was for whatever. And Ilya's like, do you know math? Like you just can cut the recipe. It's not a big deal. And that just kind of like bounces right off Shane. He is not mentally there in that moment. And Shane says, you know, leave me alone. And Ilya's like, no, and hugs him and kisses him on the neck. And usually when it touches Shane, even if he's kind of in his head or out of the moment, he tends to snap back in and kind of like melt. And he doesn't even give like a physical response to indicate that like, yeah, I may have been in my head, but like the man of my dreams is behind me and saying that like he doesn't want to leave me alone, obviously in a different sense than Shane had meant it. And he kind of grabs you and kisses you. Like that should in theory be something that takes you out of the brain fog and back into the moment. But even then he doesn't quite react, and he's just a little flat, which then kind of indicates there's probably something coming, a conversation that needs to be had, or from Ilya's point of view, not understanding what's going on, like there's a world in which you could think that maybe you did something wrong, but what would that be? And so they finally sit down to eat, and for the first time we have Ilya asking questions about Shane's life, his parents, his family, which is a very interesting, like, inverse to what we've seen consistently from Shane, right? Every time that they're together, and I'm just gonna, I guess, when they hook up and then he's leaving or they're spending time together in bed after, Shane's got 76 questions that he's got lined up that he's gonna beep, 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 beep. You know, how's Russia? Are you safe there? What's your family? You know, whatever. And we now see Ilya kind of coming to the table, obviously ready to invest, ready to demonstrate that he cares, not just about Shane, but about like the other aspects of his life. And Shane just like doesn't take the opportunity, which confirms there's something going on. His answers are short. He kind of deflects. He's like, well, what do you want to know? And Ilya's like, I know nothing. So like, start with your favorite things, bro. Like, give us something. And so to try and like spur the conversation, Ilya's like, well, I know your mom is what, Japanese. That must be where you get your looks from. Being flirty, hand on his cheek, giving him compliments. Like, Ilya is being exactly who Shane probably has wanted him to be. And for some reason, he is just not receiving it. And of course, you know, we have then we switch to, you know, oh, well, it's half. Ilya makes a joke about, oh, do you get your boring from your dad and blah, blah, blah. We get one of my absolute favorite scenes between the two of them when he's like, he played hockey for McGill. And Ilya just clowning is like, oh, for McGill? No way. What the is McGill? And he's just like, he's goofing, and he is still in the headspace that we saw them in prior to the hookup. I guess hookup is their intimate moment. And Shane again is not giving much. So Ilya asks like, hey, so do they know about you being like gay, right? And we struck the unexpected chord with that question. And Shane kind of lashes out is strong, but goes for a stinger on Ilya. And I was trying to figure out like I'm assuming Jacob showed us the things that we needed to see to set up the scene, which means there was no argument between him and Ilya or anything that happened prior to lunch. So I'm like, what is this coming from? And I was wondering, is it because he's at the cottage, right? That he has a ton of family memories in that area because his parents also have a cottage there. Is it that he's somewhat triggered because he, by design or out of his own choices, is lying again to his parents about being on the silent retreat, and he clearly does not like lying to them? Is it like this is too good to be true feeling, so I'm going to try and like wall this off? Because it's been 10 years of chaos, right? And so is it like too good to be true? Is this like I just can't let myself believe that this version of you exists or is the one that I'm going to have moving forward? Is this all over at the end of these 2 weeks? It's like going from that up and down, and we're hooking up, and then we're talking briefly, but then we're not responding to one another for no reason. And then this to that to this like very warm, comfortable, somewhat easy and albeit idealistic experience with this guy who he clearly loves. It's almost, I think, just like disorienting for him. But in that, it was almost more like, as I thought about that again, it was like, I think he just needed to, in one of the most opaque ways, like get it off his chest that he's been really hurt by Ilya and that he feels somewhat stunted because of their situationship, relationship, whatever you want to call it. And that in order for him to actually jump in with both feet, he needed to say that to him. He needed to let him know that in an alternate universe where things were different, he genuinely thinks he would have come out earlier to his family because he would have had Ilya to share with them. And I can actually really relate to that. I remember thinking, I knew I was gay. Knew it most of my life. I think fully had put words to it, albeit in between the ears, not saying it out loud. By the time I was like 12, 13. And when you think about taking on the process of coming out and the risks that are associated, especially at an age where you are not fully in control of your financial stability or your schooling and all these other things. The line that I personally told myself, and I think many people do, is like, well, I'll come out when I have a boyfriend, right? Because that's then like a net new reason to do something, right? It's like, oh, if I come out just because I'm gay, well, I've been gay my whole life. And so the so what of that is like, cool, I told you, what now? But it felt like having a boyfriend, right, that you wanted to spend time with, stay over, get permission to go like stay over at their house or whatever, go on dates with, potentially bring to family events. Like that was, to me, in my pre-coming out brain, that somehow made the decision more valuable, more meaningful. I don't know exactly how to put it into words, but I do at the base level understand like it's a new reason, a new catalyst maybe to have that conversation. And at least my, biased interpretation was that was kind of the way Shane had felt And not that Ilya was trying to keep him in the closet by any stretch of the imagination. And in all reality, Shane also is older than I was by the time I came out. But I was actually really happy, proud is maybe a little stretch, but of how Ilya handled that. He, I mean, rightfully so, said, listen, I think you can come out without giving them a list of, but he didn't, while he didn't apologize because he wouldn't, I don't think he had necessarily a reason to apologize or enough understanding of what to apologize for. He still did not retreat or recoil. He still put his hand on his leg and, he really kind of like took it on the chin and let Shane have that moment and let him say what he needed to say. And it was kind of like a silent acknowledgement of like, things are different now. And whatever Shane needed to get off his chest, he got it out and it was said. And at least, in most ways was receptive to hearing it. But I got a little flashback trigger from Boston when Shane kind of like ran out of Ilya's house. And the funny thing is that we're at Shane's place, so he can't run away. And so he's kind of like going to be forced to navigate those thoughts and feelings in the same space where he can't run, which I think ultimately was a good thing for them. And now we transition to settling in. We have had our awkward lunch with too many burgers, and we're now kind of sitting at the fireplace or fire pit, my apologies, outside, which as someone who grew up in Chicago and is married to a northern Minnesotan boy, I too kind of had to get used to that concept of like, we're going to go sit down and do this and sit by the lake and it's going to be quiet and we're just going to enjoy our time and listen to nature. So I feel you. Yeah. He's clearly kind of like, I don't know. It seems as if Shane has maybe recovered from whatever that was at lunch, but almost now we get Ilya a little bit more guarded, a little bit more like the lighthearted goofiness is kind of left, and he's more of just like a little bit more in protective mode, which makes sense based on what happened at lunch. And we're just sitting by the fire and Shane's phone goes off. It's Rose. Stank face on Ilya and the little like judgy eyes just killed me. Like the way the roles have reversed is crazy. And honestly, this is some karma that he probably deserves because he has thrown Svetlana in Shane's face and all these hot women and blah, 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 blah. And obviously Shane's like, what? It's just Rose. She's just checking in. Oh, it's just Rose. Okay. And Shane clocks him and it's like, are you jealous? Like, I literally told you I'm gay. Why are you jealous of this girl I dated that I'm now friends with? Like, what are you talking about? B, if we want to call a spade, my dude, like, come on. And he's jealous. He wants Shane just to himself. And I don't think that it's based in the fact that they have this very limited time together at the cottage. It's only 2 weeks. This is the only time frame where they can truly like unplug and be together. I think it is deeper than that. I think it is him dating Rose did something and like scarred Ilya a bit in a way that honestly he deserved from my point of view, but he's not happy. And Shane's like, this is so absurd. Like, I'm gay. And he's like, well, not so gay that you couldn't, whatever. And he's like, they were disasters. What are you talking about? And Ilya wants to know, oh, how so? And Shane, being a gentleman, is like, it's none of your business. Don't worry about it, though. I don't think she's looking for me to come back again. And he's just neon green with jealousy, which is so funny. And then that is interrupted by this loon call from off in the distance. And as someone who didn't know what the hell a loon was or what their sounds were before meeting my husband and going up north, it's definitely a different sound. Can't say it's giving wolf, but different, no question. And while hilarious one-liner that will never, cease to resonate in my mind, it was almost, it felt like to me more of Ilya, is completely out of his comfort zone. Like 1,000,000% out of his comfort zone. The only thing that he maybe feels 30% comfortable with is Shane. Being in Canada at this cottage that's not his, in a world where he could play house and feel these things and experience these things for the first time ever. And we're sitting at a fire instead of out at a club, and we're driving, I'm assuming it's like a Land Rover or something instead of, Ferraris. Like they could not, this could not be more different than the life that he's lived thus far. And in those situations, right, you are hyper reactive and hyper aware of everything around you. And so hearing a bird call in a setting where maybe he was more comfortable, he'd be like, what the hell was that? Instead, we get this like big response, right? And an emotional response because he feels uncomfortable, and he feels, I think, mainly uncomfortable now because he's in this brand new space and Shane was off. And so now he's like fight or flight mode on like, what do I do? And obviously has a big reaction to the stupid Canadian wolf bird. And I read somewhere that the loon call that Shane does back, which of course he does. I've had the pleasure of watching my husband do duck calls to ducks and trying not to lose my love for him. But I guess it's like, it's meant to be, I guess the tone of the call is warding off that bird almost to like protect, because now he is fully in his moment, right? And we get a callback to the language barriers and kind of the through line of languages throughout the show, where obviously we had kind of stumble through the press conference where Shane kind of stepped in because the reporter asked some like long rambling question that he in his brain couldn't translate quick enough to answer. We also have the scene where Ilya was sitting in bed in the hotel and watching Shane do his press conference in French, obviously being from French Canada. And then we get the call back now where it's like, oh, and you speak bird too. Get wrecked, bro. Which is just a callback to some of the turmoil that we've had, I guess positive and negative moments around that, maybe exposing an insecurity of Ilya's around English being his second language. But Shane, again, seems to kind of have like worked through whatever was going on, and we cut to Ilya has kind of settled. He's got his head laying in Shane's lap, and he's kind of just got his hand on his ribs and on his head, and Ilya's almost like hypnotized by the fire. Like he's kind of let go and relaxed, which is a great visual representation of a shift back to that like comfort zone where he's not playing Mr. Macho. He's not posturing. He's not pursing his lips or doing whatever. He's allowed himself to accept the love and attention of the man that he's very much interested in. And even just like to receive that tenderness, I think is huge. I would assume that this is probably the first time since his mom died that he is having this experience. Maybe I guess he's done this with Svetlana. But either way, it's a signifier of like how close he is feeling with Shane and how vulnerable he's willing to be with him in this moment. Shane is filling the silence and again, starts asking questions about about Ilya's family, have you talked to them? And mentions, even if they suck, like part of you must miss them, right? Like it's, and from Shane's point of view, he can't fathom his life without his family, right? They are super close. It seems like he had a generally very positive upbringing, which is not something that I believe Ilya shares, but almost echoing back to the ask that Shane had of him on the couch, which is, can we just say what we're thinking and or feeling? Without skipping a beat, he just starts sharing, which is incredibly unlike him from everything that we've seen thus far. And the cadence at which he's talking, it's, again, kind of harkening back to that hypnotized state with the fire and being warm and feeling loved by Shane and feeling safe, cradled kind of in his lap in that moment. The words just flow out like with no filter. There's no crafting, there's no hesitation, there's no joking or softening of the thoughts, the feelings. He says, my mom was great. Shane asks how she died, and he just says, by accident. She accidentally swallowed a bottle of pills. And I mean, in that moment, that is something that, as a significant other hearing for the first time, you're kind of taken aback, and you're trying to find the right words, the right thing to say, and there's kind of a bit of a pregnant pause. And Ilya fills the space and says, I don't want you to think that she's weak. She was funny. She was beautiful. She was sad. My dad was so hard on her. And Shane's just like, I mean, this is a brand new Ilya, like net new to Shane. He has never experienced this with him. And he does a very good job of leaving space for Ilya to fill and share. He doesn't need to be prompting him at this point. Like, the sharing's happening, which is awesome. And, Shane just starts kind of like rubbing his shoulder, giving him physical affirmations. And we get our second loom call, and Ilya still kind of like jolts up and, looks a little bit, but the reaction is now, 30% of the first one, but he almost like kind of immediately laughs and like falls back into Shane's lap. And the contrast between the way he reacted to the first one to the second one is kind of everything. Because when the first one comes out, he's completely out of his comfort zone. He's having an unknown disconnect with Shane for some reason. But this one, he's kind of settled in, and he's beginning to accept Shane as his safe place. Not necessarily the cottage itself, but like Shane as the person is the consistent through line that brings some joy and love and X, Y, and Z. And Shane being aware of like, that was probably a big share. You weren't overly interested in being out here in the first place, asks, do you want to go inside? And Ilya just point blank is like, nope. And he, I think in that moment, just wants to continue to sit there with Shane, sit there with the probably new level of vulnerability that he's been able to reach and express. And with the fire crackling, it's just kind of this like perfect moment that he just needs to sit in for a bit longer. It was also interesting that we have the contrast of that scene to the lunch scene, where, Ilya is trying to ask questions of Shane about Shane's family. Shane is very comfortable or continues to exist in, quote unquote, we'll call it the light if we're doing our color theory here. And that conversation about his family and all of that is happening during the daytime, and that it's not until the darkness, the nighttime, where Ilya is able to share or have that conversation, kind of showing again that they are coming from two different worlds and trying to find their way to one another. And it reminded me of a scene from a prior episode where Shane and his dad were walking down the steps at the cottage and I think talking about some other hockey player. And it's beautiful and sunny and, you know, they're laughing and joking. And then we cut to a parallel shot of Ilya back home in Russia with like I think the drapes were closed and he had a very awkward interaction with his dad. Jacob is the king of the parallels. I'll just say that. But that was another thing that was just interesting, that the conversations, although we're moving closer to the center here, still calling out maybe even just like the origins of Shane coming from a totally different world and Ilya obviously coming from another one as well. And then we cut to the next morning and Ilya is just kind of like propped up with Shane in his arms and the sun is just beaming right into his eyes, which would drive me nuts, but God bless him. And Ilya's asleep and Shane kind of rustles or wakes up and looks up at him. And it reminded me of them in Boston. I think maybe the last time that they were together and Shane was still sleeping and Ilya was like cuddling him in heat, but Ilya's eyes were just like open and just like staring at Shane, trying to take it all in. And now it's kind of the inverse. Like Shane woke up first and was looking up at Ilya. And then he, again, continuing this like unfiltered sharing of thoughts and feelings. It just looks at Shane and goes, I like you. And you're like, in that moment, in that scene, that's so cute and adorable. And then you're like, but no shit. You guys like each other. And Shane obviously replies same thing. It's like you guys already love each other and you've actually already loved each other for like a long time. But baby steps, we're moving, and it's just, I like you. And we're obviously going to evolve fairly quickly in this episode to the reality, but just a sweet little moment, just showing like they are, even though there was a little bit of from lunch to jealousy at the bonfire, we've kind of course corrected and we're back to like, we're on the same page. And then we cut to the video game scene. And we're continuing this theme of like almost like childlike joy and seriousness. And they're of course going to play a game about hockey, which they both are characters in, and they're both going to choose to play as the other person. There's just this energy there that was reminiscent of like, I have a nephew who is a freshman in college. Like I could totally see him and his friends, this same energy, not the intimacy, whatever, but like them sitting and playing down and having this conversation. Like I could totally see that, right? Well, I'm going to play this team. Oh, well, you're me, or I'm on the cover of the game. It just is giving that like level of giving that energy of like young freedom, right? And I think that's important to call out because they both in different ways, I think, have been robbed of their childhood, right? We know that Ilya, obviously, his mom died early. His dad and remaining family members are unique. And for Shane, I mean, he admitted to Rose even in the conversations that they were having, I believe it was at the restaurant that first night, where it was like, yeah, it was fun up to this age, and then it kind of got like serious, right? And like in this moment, they're on break from the sport. They're on break from life, real life, and they can just kind of have fun and be free, which is amazing. And of course, they're just about to start playing and the phone rings. And it's Hayden. And I guess his wife just had their next kid, which I think was number 4, if I'm remembering correctly. And Ilya continuing again to act in this like super light, childlike way, just kind of dramatically is like falls back on the couch. And I don't know if is jealous of Hayden, the relationship that Shane and Hayden have, or again, going back to like, again, we only have these 2 weeks together. Like, can you talk to him when you get back? Like, it's not that deep. That little purple demon emoji with the smile comes back, and he's gonna pull focus from the outside world, from Hayden X, Y, and Z, and it's just like chaotic and hilarious. The little walk of the fingers up his leg, Shane trying to keep it together, pausing, muting, stopping him, like, what are you doing? And he's like, you know what I'm doing. Stop. And he's like, okay, well, I won't touch you, but, and again, just back to that same sort of look that we saw as he took the blind remote out of Shane's hand and tossed it behind him. And I saw that there was some leeway that Jacob and team gave Connor and Hudson in that scene. And I think like Ilya kind of like slapping Shane's face and like sticking his finger in his mouth, and that was kind of improvised. It's just hilariously chaotic. And the confidence that Shane has in that mute button is next level. But he achieves what he was looking to achieve and just kind of like smiles, and again kind of like collapses back on the couch. And once the phone call's over, Shane kind of like jumps back on top of him and is like, why was that so hot? And we get another, clear callback as Ilya's like, because you like to be bad. And he clearly meant it in like a joking, cute sort of way. It's also a callback to, I think, the first time they ever hooked up, or the second, where they were kind of talking about Sasha and whatever. But Shane, again, being Shane, and in ensuring that they continue to stay out of old bad habits, kind of stops him and goes, no, that's not what this is. This isn't bad, what we're doing. Clearly not the way Ilya meant it, right? He wasn't saying like, this is a bad idea, we should never do this. But Shane wanted to make sure that was stated, and that, not only is this not bad now, but also kind of now mirroring Ilya and Ilya's statement about like, no, I haven't hooked up with anyone since the last time we hooked up. It's not just that now it's working. It's been good for a long time. It's been the right idea for a long time. We're now just finally figuring out how to make it work. But what we have had for X amount of time, I won't put a digit or put year, month, whatever on it, but it's been good. This hasn't been bad. And Ilya just, and to break the tension, Ilya's like, oh, so you love Hayden. It's like, oh God, okay. And they get back to video games. But Ilya is just like cheesing. He is a happy boy. Happy boy. And with that, we transition into a life together. I was kind of surprised by this scene, and then I think when I did my live stream rewatch, people were saying that I guess this is a normal sort of like agility drill that hockey players do, where they like pass soccer balls back and forth or try to keep it away from one another. I don't know. I played soccer my whole life, and I was just laughing at like the physicality of it and the choice of like they're out of breath and in kind of juggling the ball ish. But Ilya just almost like immediately goes and drops this like super casual, yeah, I might switch teams. Like my contract's up the end of next season. I don't know, we'll see. And Shane's like, and the way Ilya delivers that is like quintessential, almost like deflection armor, cloaked in this like casual nature that isn't actually fitting for the conversation topic. And that is the way that he needs to deliver at this point in time, those sorts of ideas and thoughts to Shane, right? It's not, hey, I'm not super happy in Boston, I miss you. I want to make sure that I can see you more. I would actually consider coming to a Canadian team to be closer to you, to have a passport for this country so that I can stay here, so that we can have a future, which is the real thing. But he kind of just like sneaks it in sideways, buries the lead in a shrug of like, oh, yeah, no, I don't know. I was just kind of thinking about it. Maybe a Canadian team, whatever, not a big deal. But it is a huge deal. This is like his biggest step in confirming that like he sees his future with Shane, and that this dichotomous life of I have these small moments with this person who I'm obsessed with and I love, but I can't do that because of my Russian background, my Russian roots, my Russian family, Russian ideals, X, Y, and Z. And I also totally get this, right? Like it's hard to take those big swing moments and say those things, especially with how raw their whole situation has been. All right, Dan, we're pausing to change the battery. We are not turning off the microphone. But really, like the subtext of what he's saying is enormous, right? I want citizenship in the country that you're from. I want to rebuild my life closer to you. And that is massive for someone who's been like at every chance kind of running away from doing this with Shane in all of the previous episodes. And then the couch scene. Our boys are chilling at the end of a day. They're both kind of tucked in on the couch. They're doing their beautiful foot choreo, which they often do, just kind of like toe to toe, and continuing, I guess, maybe the through line of sharing the thoughts that are top of mind, and piggybacking on the concept of Ilya moving to a Canadian team. We get Ilya just kind of starting us off with, I could marry Svetlana. And if I zoom out and remove emotions, I can see why we're having this conversation, right? It would be a step away with zero pressure on Shane, I guess, to expedite a path to him having a US passport at least. And the look on Shane's face. I've seen bits and pieces of me and Shane throughout this season. That death stare. Oh boy, I see you, buddy. I'm sorry. We've just had the most amazing, I don't even know how far into the 2 weeks we are at this point, where we've talked openly about how much we like each other, about this, about that. You've let me into your... Now you're going to drop, I could marry Svetlana, the person that, at least from Shane's perspective, he does not understand the relationship that they have, right? The only times that he's ever heard about her is about like, yeah, it's my friend, we hook up. I'm sorry. What, sir? What? And just the way Shane is searing lasers through Ilya, and Ilya's just on his phone like, yeah, continuing the theme of like, I'm going to say something very serious, but I'm going to make it seem nonchalant, not a big deal. And the micro expression acting from Hudson is otherworldly. You can start to see the tears welling up in his eyes. He's trying to physically stay strong to say the things that he needs to say. And in this moment, he chooses to, I guess, continue to allow for the fact that even though this has been so great and he's been able to see the side of Ilya and he wants this, there's a reality that may exist in which he, being bi, would choose or prefer to be married to a woman, right? And so instead of, I guess, getting possessive or being a little bit more inflammatory, he is asking, like, is she a woman that you would want to be married to? And Ilya responds, like, no, we're friends. We would be friends. It would be for the passport. And I think what Shane is struggling with in this is like, if let's say Ilya was fully gay, whatever that means, right? Had no sexual interest in women at all, and he was to marry a friend for the passport, right? That introduces complexity into their lives in some way, shape, or form, but it does not introduce a threat from a relationship, love, intimacy standpoint. And so he kind of circles back to this of like, but you like women. You could find a woman that you like to marry. And I can tell you, the first time watching this through, I had to pause right here at 24:47 and take a lap, because I was like, I swear to God, if Jacob and Rachel have been making me feel safe this whole episode, and this is where shit goes down, and we get the final like nuclear whatever, it's going to be a problem. And by design, I'm sure it's written this way, that we get this like, oh shit with Ilya, where yes, I have this problem. And Shane is daggers dead on. What's the problem? I get this. I like women. Yes. Yeah, I know. Ilya, I know. And everywhere I go, I'm surrounded by beautiful women. The way I would reach for a knife if I was Shane right now is like too real. And Ilya is taunting him. This is not the choice to say these women are so sexy, they're so fun, they're da 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 da. We're adding adjectives and lines that are not necessary to what is to follow. Almost to like get Shane a little worked up before he says the thing. And right as he's saying it, Shane just, oh God. And then Ilya says, I think up until this point, the most beautiful thing he said to Shane, which is, I'm always thinking about this slow fucking hockey player with beautiful freckles and a weak backhand. And immediately Shane's face lights up and he smiles. And Ilya is finally saying, not in a roundabout way or, through an example of, I know I haven't hooked up with anyone else since the last time. You're the problem in the best way. And that my life would, in theory, be easier if I just could forget about you and love these women and just go have fun. But you consume my life, my mind, my thoughts, my heart. And that I can't even begin to like feel physically what Shane would have felt in that moment, finally hearing that from him. And to do it in the most Rosanov way, he's like, and weak backhand, and he drives this terrible car, and he's so boring. And instead of leaving us on the joke, he brings us back to sincerity and admits, I'm always wishing that these women were him. And I get, it's a terrible problem. Oh, it must be so rough, buddy. And doing as Shane does, we get him kind of like double checking. He wants to hear with definitive nature and not assume, because actually we can't assume whatever the hell is going on in his brain, because he's all over the place. And we get, again, a series of lines that will just never, on my deathbed, I will be able to recite these lines. Do you want that problem to go away? And the little grunt and head nod. I don't ever want that problem to ever go away, as he's just like staring directly at Shane in Shane's flannel that he was wearing, cooking burgers with like their little toe hug. Fucking perfect. Absolutely perfect. And obviously we're playing on, English is Ilya's second language, but him inserting ever twice in that is really, from my point of view, written to give Shane extra confidence that like, I didn't misstate this, and I'm going to say this like double the times. I don't ever want this to ever go away. I'm here. I am wrapped around your finger, whether it feels like it or not. You are consuming my life, and I don't want that to change. And that gives Shane the confidence to say the thing he's wanted to say, which is, don't marry Svetlana. We will figure something out. Just don't marry her. And as he says that, and his eyes are welling up, he doesn't say it with his words, but he's saying to, I want to marry you. And Ilya just melts at the sight of Shane doing that. And I think there's probably something also that he resonates with in Shane making that statement, being bold and asking for what he wants, or asking Ilya to not do that. Right, instead of just being the like, okay, you know, because he has played it very gingerly with Ilya up until this point, and rightfully so, because when he has ever tried to even do the smallest thing, he had been met, especially early on, with these kind of like reflexive outbursts, and Ilya just saying, okay, in a whisper. Oh my god, the single best scene in the entire season. And our boys have gone to bed, and Shane has not been sleeping. He's been thinking, and he's got some ideas. Holy shit, this is me personified. But he, flicks on the light. Hey, I have another idea. What? Okay. And Shane just starts in. What about super close by? They're not at their cap. They could afford you. We could start changing the narrative. And just in general, right? Waking people up in the middle of the night to have a conversation like this is a lot. And then English as your second language, you're like, whoa, pause. What the hell's a narrative? And Shane pivots to like teacher dad mode of like, okay, we're going to break this down super simple and kind of walk you through, which is super cute. And I'm sure, similar to how he will end up being as a father. And we're seeing a bit of Yuna out of him at this point, right? Like, listen, Ottawa and Montreal aren't these massive rivals. And like, there's guys that are friends on teams, and we're not these like rookies that need to like keep up this facade of we're rivals and in blah 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 blah. And as he's like walking through it, kind of like lovingly looking down at Ilya and like tapping his hand on his chest, he says something that on rewatching really kind of stands out to me, because in this moment he says to Ilya, we don't need to keep this up until we retire, do we? And we'll see later that maybe his definition of keep this up is different, right? Maybe what he's referencing is this like fake, we hate each other thing. But as we'll hear in a couple minutes, like they get asked the question, like, are you really going to keep this a secret and, whatever until you retire? And they both kind of answer yes. And so I don't know if it's like in this moment, maybe Shane's a little bit more hopeful about what could be, or maybe it really is just simply referencing like this public personification of them hating each other and thus not even being able to be seen together out and about, which would obviously come with him moving to Ottawa and being closer. They would have more opportunities to go and do things, right? And still, it's like, it is late and you're saying so many things. And Shane takes it even like a level down of like, all right, basics. You play for Ottawa. I play for Montreal. We're only 2 hours apart, and we can start a charity. Something we both care about. We make up a story like I approached you, Ilya, to not be outdone. It's like, or I approached you. And Shane's like, what? Ever. These details aren't fucking important What I'm trying to get at is we need to craft a story, Yuna Jr., that gives us an organic reason to be buddies and at events and spending time together in the public eye. And of course, we get the most Yuna Jr. version of himself being like, and we'll still play hard against each other on the ice, which the euphemism is not lost on Ilya, not what Shane meant. And it's like, clearly Shane is trying to be serious. Like he wants to make a plan. He wants to see this potential reality come to fruition. And the interpersonal aspect then gets kind of highlighted. Shane saying we'd only be 2 hours apart all year round. He's kind of like gently stroking Ilya's chin. And he's like, you could apply for Canadian citizenship without having to marry someone that you don't want to marry. And Shane takes the big leap and says, maybe one day after we retire, we could like be together for real. And I think that hits Ilya like a stack of bricks, because Shane, again, being someone who hasn't asked for much, hasn't expressed clearly what he's wanted from Ilya, like in a genuine sense, really up until earlier that night on the couch where he said, I don't want you to marry Svetlana. That was the arrow to Ilya's Achilles heel for sure. And we get, you really think that far ahead, Hollander, which I'm sure if you asked my husband, he would have kind of a similar reaction of like, you really think that far ahead? You really are already running scenarios like that out and thinking about this move impacts this thing that does that thing, the thing can do this, and then family. And I feel you, Shane. Yes, that's how my brain works. And Shane just comes back again with a fire line, and he just says, I do about this. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Ilya shows up and asks or is confirming, is that what you want? And not so much in Shane, that's what you want, but more of a subtext of you want that too. And Shaney comes back with so much, it scares me. Our boys are filter off. We've gone from not only just sharing thoughts openly and freely, but maybe feelings openly and freely, which officially cracks Ilya. I would assume that part of his tactic for keeping himself distanced from Shane, trying to keep things light and physical and not get to the point that we're at, includes him telling himself he would never want to like for real be with me. He would never want this to be anything more than physical. He would never want, let's let our imaginations run, to get married and have kids and build a life and blah, 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 blah. And by design, especially if that's part of your separation mechanism, you would never ask this question in the off chance that you would get this answer. And now the thing that would be holding you back from falling, from realizing this is exactly what you want and it's possible, he takes the risk and he asks the question and he gets the answer. And he needs to remove himself for a second and tries to not show the emotion. And I think a big part of it is that. And there's also, I'm sure, a component to it that while he's had relationships and physical rendezvous with people, he has not felt this way about someone and have that reciprocated to him ever before as well. And so he's kind of absorbed by the wave of emotions that comes over him. And Shane, being a perfect shepherd for him in this moment, is like, hey, no, turns his face towards him, is soft, kind of goes to lean in and kiss him. And that last barrier that Ilya had is gone. He goes for it, leans in, swings over, jumps on top of Shane, kisses him, and almost as a warm-up or a way to like psych himself up to actually say it, he says to him in Russian, "I love you," and finally drops the love bomb in English. And he just like barely chokes it out. And Shane, now totally caught off guard, and this shot is phenomenal, by the way, from like a cinematography standpoint. He's just staring up at him like, holy shit, this just happened. Holy shit. And again, we've got this like perfectly pregnant pause as he's trying to like digest what just happened. And you see Ilya's reflex kick in, and he goes, I mean, to try and find a way to like pull the ripcord, like eject. And Shane's just like, oh my God, I love you too. And that hits Ilya like a freight train, and he just like collapses on top of Shane. And I mean, it's probably the first time he's heard that, maybe outside of Svetlana, since his mom died, ever felt this way probably in his life romantically with a partner. And he just like turns into like a love puddle on top of him. And Shane goes into just like there's not enough ways he can be like touching and caressing and like physically reaffirming him in that. And we get a really organic share, I guess, from Shane. He's like, oh my God, I love you so much. And he asks, does it fucking kill you too? Right? Because up until this moment, it has been so painful to love this man that much. And almost in a way to signify that we've like crossed the chasm, Ilya responds with, not anymore. Ugh. And I think it, again, looking back through the trajectory that kind of got us here, his father's death, his cutting ties with his brother, him getting support from Svetlana that like she knows you're in love with Shane and you should go be with him and go love him, who's his best friend in the world, to Scott Hunter coming out and being a visible representation of the possibility, to you accepting this invitation to the cottage, to the experience that you've had together up until this point. For Ilya, in this moment, there's like pre-cottage and post-cottage. And his life is completely different. Now, we are in, I guess, pre-cottage and before cottage and after cottage. We're in AC. We're in after cottage mindset. And that because he's been able to finally verbalize this, because he's finally heard the things that in theory he's always wanted to hear from Shane, and they're both on the same page, and they're both just so stupid in love with each other. And there's even a pathway to a plan where the things that put big strains on their relationship, like him going back to Russia every summer and them not being close to each other except for when they play and all that stuff, there's a path to this working. It doesn't kill me anymore because I can see how it can work, and I know that you want it to work too. And again, this sort of like role reversal where typically, again, if we're going back to stupid reductive tropes, Ilya's the macho top, Shane's the bottom, blah, 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 blah. Like, Ilya is just collapsed on top of Shane and hugging on him and vulnerable and open and raw emotionally. And Shane is his safe place. He is the rock. He is home. And now we are transitioning into Love Drunk. In our post I love you glow, we get this like short but I think really important shot of the two of them down by the lake. It seems like it's the next morning, and Ilya's just sitting out there and soaking up the sunrise, which, again, echoing back to his statement originally about the fire, right? So we just sit here and look at it. He is fully in. He's down there by himself, just sitting, taking it all in, the beauty of the moment, his surroundings and or the actual moment. And I also couldn't help but think about Skip and Elena in her whole talk track with them about needing sunshine. And we have this like beautiful picture of the sun reflecting off the water, and there's this like soft, warm glow as Ilya's just sitting on the rock, and Shane comes to join him. And we see Ilya smoking, which we know Shane has not been a big fan of throughout the season. And instead of kind of reprimanding him or trying to change him, if you're reading the subtext, he just kind of comes in, puts a blanket around Ilya, sits next to him. It looks like Shane's got a coffee, and they just both kind of sit there and are staring at the start of the sunshine for the day. And that this morning is really the first morning AC, right? This is the first morning where they have exposed enough of themselves emotionally that this is really the start of the rest of their lives. And there's just this like quiet, calm, beautiful moment to, I think, demonstrate the euphoria that they're in right now, having, after so many fucking years, gotten what they both really had hoped would come from this engagement, whether they were able to say that to themselves or not. After their sort of romantic morning by the lake, we get a quick shot of them back in bed, and in contrast to the intimacy scenes that we've seen, they are both just so love drunk. And Ilya in particular has been a bit of definitely checking in on Shane, consenting, blah, 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 throughout the intimate scenes that we've seen. Here he is just like, could not be more in love, could not be more tender in this moment, could not be more obsessed with the experience and with Shane. And it's on both sides, but I think the contrast is stronger from the way Ilya has been portrayed previously up until now. And even we get Shane saying like, this is real, right? Like this high that we're both on, like you're feeling this too, right? And Ilya just like nods his head and almost like unable to speak. And just the way Ilya is looking at Shane at like 32-53. If there was ever a look of holy shit, this is my life, I can't believe how lucky I am, this is it. And after that, what I'm assuming was an extremely enjoyable time with one another, we've got Ilya kind of like staring up at the ceiling, and Shaney boy coming in with another, hey, I've been thinking about that thing that I talked about the other night, and I've got more ideas to share. He kind of leans over and asks Ilya what his mother's name was. And as Ilya turns over, and the way that he responds that it's Irina, it is so soft. The tone of his voice, the look in his eye, this like iced out, scared, reactive, aggressive version of him has disappeared. And And he asks why. And Shane, I think almost in a way, understanding that he is too much sometimes, or is perceived as such, and wanting to make sure that the proposal he's about to put out is understood, that it's coming from a place of love, or a place of love. He kind of leans down and kisses Ilya's chest before he continues. And he tells Ilya, I was thinking maybe we could start like a summer hockey school and give away the money to mental health organizations and suicide prevention. Obviously, understanding the importance that would have to Ilya, and the way that he even briefly has talked about his mom, and wanting to not still yet overstep, because they are very early into AC territory here. It's like, it was just an idea. And Ilya's just staring down at him, eyes darting back and forth, just like, holy shit. He's not only the sexiest guy that I've ever seen. He's not only someone that like matches me from a sport standpoint. He's not only someone who, he's also the most thoughtful person I've ever met. And in that, I think he sees a lot of the positive characteristics that his mom brought to his life in Shane. And he says, she would have loved you like I love you. And from a compliment standpoint, right? Like, that is amazing. And I think if I were Shane in that situation, I would take that on as a compliment and try to, I think your instinct is to react. Selfish isn't the right word. You're saying this thing to me as a compliment, so I'm receiving the compliment, right? But instead of taking it that way, he turns the focus back to Ilya, and maybe even in a way to continue demonstrating that it's not just like, you are going to meet me here, but I want to meet you there. And that he goes, can you say it again in Russian, please? And that I want to hear it from you in an unfiltered way. I want to hear you in the way that you hear yourself in your head, or the way that thought was generated. I want the authentic, the unedited version from you, which I think then just also sends Ilya, as if he wasn't totally lost in the sauce. I mean, that I think was the nail in the coffin. And even just the choice for Shane to kiss Ilya on the chin and not on the lips, it's like continuing to reiterate this like soft, non-sexual intimacy that they are just fully on right now. And then we get this, just like, we had this super soft, intimate moment right in bed, and now we're down at the lake having fun again with this childlike whimsy and goofiness. And Ilya's doing handstands in the water with swim shoes on, which is just so hilarious to me. It is somewhat reminiscent of the pool scene where, Shane's kind of sitting up on the rock and Ilya's goofing around in the water. And almost to bring the topic back up, Ilya's like, oh, is this where you do your yoga? And Shane's like, no, I do it up there. Wait, what? And he's like, yeah, I saw the video. It helped me fall asleep. It was so boring or whatever. And just giving him shit. But also admitting like, hey, I've been watching some stuff about you, and for quite some time. And as we're goofing around, how's the water? I don't know. You're the one in it. Splash. And Shane's like, what if I had my phone in my pocket? And it's like, Ilya's like, you don't. It's been on the table. It's been ringing all morning. And on my first time watching this, I don't know why, my brain was like, oh, that must be Rose, because she had been texting before, or maybe that's Hayden because whatever. Maybe I was just so in bliss mode that like for the first time I had actually unclenched and was not looking for like what's the next thing that could happen. I'm like, oh, our boys are good. Our boys are good. They've said they love each other. We've continued to do this thing. They're love drunk. We're all very happy. We're having a good time. This is fucking great. In no way, shape, or form did my brain go to, oh, that could be your parents. And we get another phenomenal Ilya quote, which is, gimme kiss. This man. And then he just dives back into the water. He's a mess. Obviously, then they're kind of heading up back to the cottage post swim break. And what do you want to do for lunch? I don't know. Oh, cool. We'll have some time. You know, la, 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 la. And now on to the parents. And there's a stranger in the window. Not a stranger. Shane's dad, who gets a full view of his son being kissed by Ilya against the glass sliding door and grabbing his butt. And Ilya peeks about 2 inches to the right and, oh, shoot, there is someone in your house. And Ilya is so calm. Shane, begins to kind of freak out, and he's like, you should. He's like, yeah, doesn't move. Should I? No. He is just like so locked in and calm, which is crazy to me. And I will say, Mr. Hollander Sr. did not take a single break, did not take a single pause from when he saw that to getting in that car, because he got to moving and confirming it's I think a Land Rover Discovery or Defender that Shane has, and of course his dad has a Volvo. Like, the practicality of it all is just hilarious. But he didn't waste a fucking second, and he was out of there. And we get the music coming in underneath. I think it's the same score from when Shane picked Ilya up at the airport, which is like, again, like a heightened heart rate. We're going back into nervous territory, panic territory even. Hi. What do you need? I have a pooch that very much wants attention right now for some reason.
Okay, bye, love you.
Bye, love you.
Hi, bud.
And our boy Shane is officially in panic zone. I was going to say USA, Canada. And with every panicked question that's coming out of Shane's mouth, whether that's directed at Ilya or not, Ilya is MVP boyfriend status. He is calm, he's cool, he's collected, and, what should I even do? We should go talk to them. We should go talk to them. And despite not knowing, really, honestly, knowing nothing about Shane's family from firsthand experience, he knows enough through the way Shane has talked about his family and the perceived closeness that they have together, even in the way that he's kind of freaking out, despite him saying earlier in the episode that they would be fine with it. At least he would assume they would be. Ilya is echoing back, hey, they will talk to you. They will talk to you. It's fine. And we get this guilt component for Shane that's come up, across the episodes around lying. And that's not who you are, and that's not who I am, and that's not how we work together as a family. And I found his reaction, especially in that moment around, I lied to them for so many years. I'm trying to think of how to say this. My brain never went there, ever in part of the coming out process. It was, there were reasons that I was in the closet, and that's why, and they are the reason why, not my parents, but those reasons are the reasons why I lied, and that I didn't feel safe in telling the truth. And I maybe this is my lived experience only. I don't know, if it's universal or not, but I just absolutely did not, like, that thought never crossed my mind as like a problem or a potential problem from going to go out or talk to them. And that clearly is something that's very heavily weighing on his mind, and I think helps add shading to the colors of the conversation that they had at lunch, where Shane was expressing frustration that he hadn't yet come out to them, even though he felt that they would be okay with it, potentially because of Ilya, X, Y, and Z. And Shane is totally valid in all of his feelings. I am not dismissing his experience in any way, shape, or form. But it's an interesting dichotomy, I guess, of Ilya has been able to be free and himself and embrace going to the cottage and getting to the point that he is emotionally with Shane. Really, I would say almost only because his dad has passed and he's cut ties with Alexei. Whereas Shane is calling this moment his worst nightmare. And not that he's doing this on purpose or even fully grasps like the weight of everything that Ilya has dealt with. But it's like, from Ilya's point of view, it's like, so you told me that you think they're going to be okay with it. You guys are super close. This is your worst nightmare. And that almost in a sense, like, that nightmare wouldn't even be rated the same as like the daily life that felt. And there's no like vindictive spirit or anything in the way that is responding at all. I'm thinking as I zoom out and look at these two people in this moment, it's just a very interesting, it continues to highlight the differential between them that for the rest of their lives in their relationship, they will have to figure out and navigate and manage. I mean, in no way, shape, or form are my husband and I on like different ends of the scale like Shane and Ilya are, but there are just still things that like are instinctual, intuitive, understood as like the way we do things or the, blah, 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 that don't overlap for us. And we still, even 10 years later, have to like be cognizant of those things. But, at 3641, Shane is just saying like, this is my nightmare. And the philosopher Ilya Rozanov hits us with, maybe it's time to wake up. Yes. Okay. And not even like, ouch, but holy yeah, it is. And it's time to lock in, and this is your reality, and we're going to have to go face it, and you're not going to go do that alone. I will go with you, and I'm being here rock solid, this like foundation for you as you're panicking and freaking out. I was just so impressed with starting from kissing him against the window and his dad seeing through the end of this episode. Like, this Ilya, 100 out of 10. 100 out of 10. And he just like gently taps Shane's elbows to like, come on, like, give me a hug, come here. And Shane just, he goes for it and then just kind of melts to the floor and admits, obviously, like, fuck, I'm scared. And again, Rockstar Ilya is like, yeah, it's scary, but you're brave. Like, you've got this, bro. I'm here with you. We're going to make it. It's okay. And not one to take a compliment, I guess. Shane's like, shut up. And Ilya reaffirms him. No, you are. You're brave. And again, Shane being worried about everyone else but himself. It's like, so much for easing them into it. And obviously to kind of like lighten the mood a little bit. Joke, but not joke to a point that would be inappropriate for the situation. He's like, well, maybe he didn't see. Shane now knows what he's trying to do. He's trying to like lift the mood, try to get him kind of out of his head. So he just kind of like nods and smirks a little bit. And the whole time, Ilya is just locked in on Shane's face and watching every little micro expression and trying to catch every word, that's coming out of his mouth So we know actively like translating that in his brain. And Mr. Planner, Shane, is like, okay, well, I'll get changed. I'll go over there, and gets stuck. And he's like, fuck, what am I going to say? And just kind of, again, collapses into Ilya. And he's like, do you want me to come with you? And Shane leans into the vulnerability of that moment, says, would you? And this has also been a theme, I think, with Ilya in many ways, and also with Shane, of like in these moments where one of them is kind of panicking and the other is there, they refuse to leave space for questions. And so you get a definitive from Ilya, of course. Like, it's not a, yeah, I can. And I think maybe it's just like the Minnesota nice in me. But often I think there's moments where someone may ask for something or you may offer something and they reply back and you want to give them space to reject the offer. So you're like, well, yeah, I'm more than happy to. You just, you let me know. Right. Or yeah, I want to, but I don't want to overstep. But there is just such a definitive, of course, period, which instills confidence and demonstrates like, I have no question about whether or not I would do that for you or be there for you in that way. And so if you're going to ask, I'm going to give you the answer and I will be there. And then we get Ilya coming out of the front door to get in the car to obviously go over to Shane's parents in a Boston Raiders t-shirt. And even though we're being supportive of Ilya and we're emotionally being there for Shane in this moment, Shane's like, really? Just the look on Ilya's face is like, he's like, that's not going to help. Like, what? They don't know I play for Boston? Like, you're focusing on the wrong thing here. Let's get in the car, my dude, and go over to your parents. And clearly we've put on some like semi-chill, soothing music. Shane is rightfully so uncomfortable and kind of like strumming the gear shift and continuing to be pre-boyfriend of the year, reaches over and just kind of like puts his hand on his and it's like, it's going to be okay. Relax. I'm here. Pulls his hand up, gives it a kiss. And you can see Shane's eyes. This shot is actually amazing at 38:30. We get kind of the rear view mirror shot of Shane's eyes. And even as Ilya goes to kiss his hand, he kind of like, just for a brief second, like closes his eyes and you can tell is like calming down a little bit, as much as I guess you can until you've ripped the Band-Aid off. And Ilya goes and kind of is holding his hand, but like rubbing his thumb on Shane's hand. And multiple points throughout the season, I've called out that Ilya is definitely a tactile, like self-soother. And in the bar scene, he's like rubbing the top of the glass. And there are multiple other instances that I can't think of off the top of my head where he's like doing his self-soothing tactic for Shane and not for himself, because he's just trying to find a way to help his man like relax. And they get there and Ilya's ready to jump out of the car. He's got his seatbelt off. He's ready to open the door. And Shane continues to be himself and panics a little bit and is like, wait, maybe you should wait in the car. And he catches the Rosanov brow raise of like, hey, what? Run that by me one more time. It's like, right. Oh, yep. No, sorry. Okay, let's go. There is so much being said in Ilya's face at that moment that doesn't need words. And immediately Shane's like, nope, you're right. Let's go. Come on. And we've got our thumbs in our pockets. We've clearly retreated a little bit physically, which makes sense going into the situation. But it's interesting because this is like his family, lake house, cabin, cottage, whatever, where he should feel very comfortable, welcome, X, Y, and Z, and clearly does not because of what has transpired. And the way he walks in the door is like, it's me, Shane, Like, you just walked up the driveway in front of like the biggest picture window of all. Like, yeah, I would hope that someone that's not our son wouldn't just walk into our house. But he's clearly feeling so uncomfortable and just like not knowing how to navigate this. And much like Shane, his dad just kind of like immediately starts kind of word vomiting, like, I left my charger at your place, blah, blah, blah. And the way that Yuna looks over when Ilya walks in makes me think either Shane's dad did not recognize that it was Ilya who was kissing Shane, didn't tell her that, which I don't know why you wouldn't, but she was not expecting to see Rosanov. Clearly she had gotten a debrief from her husband, but that's the way that her eyes traveled and like almost opened a little bit more with shock. Definitely made me feel like she did not know that it was him, which is crazy. And Ilya standing there like a toy soldier or like a kid that just got reprimanded, like looking ahead but not making eye contact, like physically present, just kills me. And again, immediately Shane goes into apology mode of like, you shouldn't have found out that way. Which, I mean, I guess I should open it up to the comments. Like, if you have come out, did you feel, I guess, that like sense of remorse in the way that he's demonstrating it? I full transparency did not. So I don't, this does seem somewhat foreign to me, but I also, even though there have been many moments, I guess, throughout the season where I've said I am Shane, 99% of the time I'm not Shane. And so I can get that we just probably have different experiences in life and whatever, but I just did not, I don't know. I felt like I didn't owe anyone anything around that. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a selfish prick. Who the fuck knows? And this is where Yuna, I was like, I haven't disliked you. I haven't like loved you as a character so far. But the way in which she delivered the line, found out what exactly? I was like, am I going to have to dislike this lady? I don't want to. The bravado with which she said that sentence gave me like bully energy, because there's no way that his dad came back to their house and just said, I went over to Shane's to get my charger and he was there kissing someone, and didn't mention that it was a boy. Didn't mention, I mean, I guess, I don't know, maybe didn't mention that it was Rosanov. Maybe he didn't recognize him. So, like, you're not creating a safe space or an inviting space for Shane to share this information with you. And I didn't like that. But Shane was not deterred. And so he says that I'm gay. And again, we get a little bit of an apology and an introduction to the person that we all now know who he is and who was macking on your boy. This is Ilya ... Rosanov. And even though he's fighting it, as he says Ilya's last name, his mouth is fighting a smile. And I don't know if the smile is because it's on the surface hilarious that he's introducing Ilya to his parents this way, or that it's like a giddy smile that he's trying to keep down because he's obviously super in love with this guy. But you can just see him try and like swallow his smile, which I just love. And we get hi over the shoulder. Oh God, the comedy of Ilya in this moment is just undeniable. And as Shane is trying to describe what is going on, we get the lovers. Ew, gross Ilya, no. Another earworm that will never leave my brain. Just the silent, oh, hands back at attention. Just love it. And we get, oh, but you hate him. No, I actually... Shane goes and kind of swallows right before he says it out loud that I love him. And follows it up with his genuine thought, which is, this is not how I thought I was going to tell you. And I totally get that. And with another pregnant pause, we get another suggestion to, can we just sit down? which tends to be his nervous tick. But his family, unlike Ilya in many circumstances, obliges. And then as they're kind of sitting and beginning, I guess, the rest of the conversation at the dining table, I was kind of surprised by the statement, I think we thought maybe you were gay, which to me then it feels antithetical to Yuna's response T minus 2 minutes earlier of tell us what. And the tone, I did not see either of those things coming. And they both felt like oil and water to me together. And I think during my live stream, someone had mentioned that maybe in the book or somewhere else, right? There was mention of like the conversation that they had with Shane at lunch or brunch one day at that restaurant about like going to Wimbledon and the Princess of Sweden or whatever the hell, that it didn't get fully captured in the show, or I didn't fully get it from the show, was like, why are you doing that? Why are you pushing that on him? Like, we kind of have the sense that maybe he's not interested in girls. And it was like, oh, it was just a reflex or something like that. But from the show's perspective only, that wasn't my takeaway, I guess, from the lunch scene in an earlier episode. And so to hear her say that, especially given her statement and the vibrato with which she said it, just kind of took me by surprise. And as Shane kind of asks for how long, and they say, well, a while, I guess, you can see his gaze drop to the table, and he won't say it, and he would try to not think it. But in that moment, he is so worked up about lying to them, about having to tell them in this way, about the guilt that he feels. And I would think it's a very valid thought for him to have of like, why the fuck did you never ask? Why did you never hint? Why did you not leave that door open, even in, sort of like casual conversations? Because that was something, like, for me personally, I grew up Catholic with the whole rhetoric and BS of like, that is wrong, you don't do that. And if we didn't have any that we knew of, at least gay people in our lives or our social circles, but like if there were things that like my friends or my family had, noted of like, oh, Frank and John, they seem so happy. Like, I'm so happy that they found each other or whatever. Stupid example. You're, without asking me if I'm gay, you are leaving the door open and explicitly kind of like, hey, I support them and they're gay. If you do the extrapolation, I will probably support you if you're gay. And Shane's mouth at like 40-31 is, again, almost like he's swallowing that reaction. And they're so nonchalantly talking about it, which then when you contrast that with, this is my worst nightmare, I don't even know if they're going to want to talk to me, blah, 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 blah. Not that you feel stupid, because that all of those assumptions are valid, especially not having been given indications otherwise. But you feel a little bit like, God, what, am I insane? Did I make this all up in my head? Did I create this world of worry? And they're just sitting over here basically being like, yeah, we've just been waiting for you to come out. Or we definitely thought it was a possibility. In a way that is not derogatory, is not negative. It's just kind of simple statement. I can tell you that I wouldn't have reacted in the moment, but I would not have reacted positively to that once I had a chance to kind of like digest what had happened. And while that was so like nonchalant and I don't know, positive more so than negative, then the dad just goes in on Ilya. It's like, I can't believe that it's with this fuck. Like, hey, I'm sitting right here. and your son just told you that he loves me. What are we doing? Like this hang up was so confusing to me. Ilya. And we get into timeline chat. When did this start? It's been a long time a-coming, and it's been many versions of many things, parents. And when there is a pause in description of, oh, well, you were in love for that long? No, of course not. We were. I think it's fairly clear. Let's all just kind of move on here. And even the way that they say no to like, so you've been in love is hilarious because, I mean, legitimately, they were just like kids hooking up. And they just both openly admitted, like no less than 24 hours ago, that they actually love each other. But that was just hilarious. And we get another lovers reference, which gets shot down by Shane. And almost in a weird split state, his dad is pouring some Russian vodka, which could be perceived as an olive branch, right? As he's actively saying, so there were no nice men in Montreal. The way my neck would be like, am I not here? Am I not? I'm so... You're meeting the guy that your son loves for the first time, especially in this capacity. And you have the audacity to say that in front of me. I mean, I could clock Yuna maybe saying that, but David, some rogue shit coming out of his mouth. And Yuna, maybe in an attempt to change the topic, but to another bad topic, is like, well, you never let him win, did you? To which he's like, I'm your son. Do you ever let dad win at cards? Absolutely not. Which then is a funny callback to when Shane wakes Ilya up to go through the plan or his proposed plan. He's like, we can still play hard against each other on the ice. It's like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. And now somehow dad is back on board and is asking, is your plan to kind of like keep this a secret until you're retired? Kind of like we had mentioned earlier. And Shane responds with probably, I don't know, and almost in a way to reflect probably the true state of where they're at. It responds with probably yes. And bust out my neck brace, because then Yuna is like, oh no, that's sad. And I'm like, girl, you have got to pick Blaine. I cannot. She was all over the map for me this whole episode. I'm like, I don't know what's coming, what's going, who's who in the zoo. And, Shane's like, we can't just come out and announce it. And part of me wanted to be like, why not? This is post skip kiss on the ice. You have a template to follow. You've seen a positive story come of it. Granted, it's not as maybe colored or in depth as maybe their love story, because they are both athletes and quote unquote rivals. And so to me, I was expecting then like the next question or line of questioning being like, well, didn't you talk to Scott, or have you reached out to Scott? But instead then we get this, Ilya, I've only heard of you as a woman's man, or, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I think it's appropriate in the awkwardness and the real life fumbling of these sorts of conversations that are not thought out ahead of time. It's kind of sprung on you. But it was, if I was to give an adjective for the way Shane's parents are handling this conversation, I would say clumsy with a side of support. But Ilya recovers in the best possible way. Yes, I've been with women, but I've only ever been in love once. And Shane echoes that sentiment. And we get a foot tap, the foot choreo. It's their like little secret love language. And again, my read on Yuna is that statement was received negatively. I didn't get the sense of like, I'm overwhelmed with emotion that is positive or net neutral as she got up from the table. And so as Shane goes out to meet her in the front yard, the first time I watched this, I had no fucking clue how that was going to go. I have said it no less than probably 40 times over the span of this series. I will continue to say it. If you do not watch the show and leave with the utmost appreciation and respect for Hudson Williams' micro expression and facial acting, you haven't watched the show. The script is like a half a page, single spaced. You add all of the things that he is saying through his motions, through his reactions, through water welling in his eyes, to his one corner of his mouth turning down or up, or the way he breathes and nods his head back and forth. It's a 10-page paper. I am like so stupid impressed with him. And same with Connor, especially seeing Connor, seeing both of them for who they are as people in the media. And I think they're like semi-organic, natural selves. And to these characters, like they could not be more opposite. Actually, Shane is much more like Ilya, or Hudson would gravitate much more towards an Ilya character. And Connor would gravitate much more to a Shane character but him trying to muster up the courage to tell his mom that he tried not to be gay and that he couldn't help it. Ooh. And her immediate response was the parachute and the life jacket that I was fucking waiting for this whole segment. And she just dives in and is like, oh my, no. the physical response that you were getting is not at all that I'm disappointed in you being gay or anything like that. You have nothing to apologize for. And there was a tangential connection to, I think it was maybe the cadence and the outpouring of motherly love here that was somewhat reminiscent to me of Jennifer Garner in Love, Simon. And I can't remember exactly what she says, but at the end, she's like, you can finally exhale or something like that. And that was the mom character that I was hoping we were going to get from Yuna, but I was clenched and uncomfortable up until 44, 47. I wasn't picking up what she was putting down, if she was putting down support and love. I was very nervous. And she's like, look at me. And he finally, after a lot of coaching, does look at her. And his eyelashes are just like coated in tears. Between Kip's dad, who is like executive MVP of parenthood in this show, I think it can be very important for parents who have dealt with kids coming out, maybe not as well as you wanted, or have an inkling that this is something that's coming your way. The succinct way that she states these next few lines is incredibly important, because you have to realize that your kid is in fight or flight, is over reading everything you say and you don't say to try and understand where the bomb is, and stating, I'm sorry that I made you feel like you couldn't tell me, which is acknowledging that even though you had an inkling that this may be your child's reality, you knowingly or unknowingly didn't do enough to encourage them to feel confident enough to do it with you in coming out, and following it up with, I'm so, so proud of you. So acknowledging there is pain that you've been going through that I may have in some way contributed to by not making it comfortable enough with you. And that even given what we've talked about today, I'm proud of you. Oh, and the please forgive me as the tail end. That's how it's done. That's how it's done. It's egoless. It is you love your kid. You didn't knowingly do things to inhibit them, but like you are acknowledging that there are ways in which you have contributed to their fear that you had no clue about. And you should apologize for those things, even without knowing what they are. So yeah, 180 on Yuna. And of course, then she snaps back into momager mode. We felt our feelings, and now it's time to, get back to strategy, which Shane was not ready for. And Ilya now has like a giant plate of pasta, is just going ham. Yuna's spewing out, well, we got to call these people and do this and do that. A little like shimmy shake at 46:37. I've said it already many times. Ilya in episode 6 is my absolute fucking favorite. I just love. I hope he continues this trajectory into season 2. But clearly Shane is getting overwhelmed. He has already expressed that like we're not just going to come out and make some big statement. We're planning on waiting till retirement. And Yuna is brand deal. and we get another sneak peek into where Shane, quote unquote, gets it. And they bring up the idea of Ilya playing in Ottawa. And Yuna's like, you would turn your back on Boston after they drafted you and blah, blah, blah. And you get just like the zinger of like he's prioritizing me. Like that's a good thing. And she's kind of taken aback. And even in that moment, which was sweet between Ilya and Shane, Ilya's like, I see where you get it from, Mr. Obsessed with Hockey. And Dad trying to troubleshoot is like, well, have you talked to Scott Hunter? And obviously Shane's like, no. Ilya out of nowhere is like, yeah, of course. I reached out to him. I texted him I talked to him after the MVP awards or whatever. And Shane's like, first of all, Ilya reaching out to someone else in the league just to like, thumbs up, good job for you, out of character, right? So like in general, even the optics are a little weird. And then also on this topic, interesting, obviously didn't discuss Shane and him, but I think we all know Scott knows. And for some reason, that was the last straw. And Shane collapses into a panic attack. And his parents are just kind of like looking across the table at him. He's like, no, I'll be fine. And Ilya, now being kind of the master of understanding Shane's isms, the physical clues of when he's stressed or overwhelmed or shutting down, knowing that, and honestly probably seeing many of the highs and the lows, the 5% on either side that maybe his parents haven't seen in a long time, steps organically right into action and does what he does best, which is kind of like regain physical touch with Shane and divert his attention back to like the reality of the situation. And also the mouth acting on Connor, I just fucking love them. They are tangent. Both Connor and Hudson deserve every single positive thing headed their way, career-wise and other. If any of you are that are typing gross, hateful shit in comments about them, get the fuck off my channel. Like, I'm being so for real. You are so gross and disgusting. These are two incredible people who portrayed characters beautifully, that have taken the world by storm, held the characters in high regards in the way that they've done all of the press for this thing. I have zero room in my circle, in my space, for any of you who think it's cool to be hateful. And if you have a problem with it, take it up with me in the comments and you'll lose, okay? Tangent over. Your family is here. Your boyfriend is here. You're good here. My what? It's like you guys told each other you loved each other the night before and have a plan for him to move to the same country as you. But again, back to the steps. We're we're a little bit behind on the trajectory here. And that seemed to be the thing that kind of snapped Shane back into the moment. And that little, those two fingers under his chin and the kiss, clearly seeing that touched his parents, and they're just like smiling and looking over and like feeling that their son is safe with this person since rookie season, the summer before. I was a puddle of tears when I watched this the first time. Just so perfect. And then okay, well, now the silent retreat thing's off, so we'll come over. We're going to do dinner again, blah, blah, blah. Don't worry, we'll stop over. Please text. Dad's like, we're going to text because we're not going to run into their lover moment. And Ilya, just as if like he's known them for forever and is already in the family. Thank you for the pause. As Shane goes and turns on the car and just kind of like takes the first sigh of relief, Ilya just looks over, smiling, and kind of like rubs the back of his neck like, you did it. You did it. We did it. And we drive off into the sunset. And they are just in heaven, and rightfully so. It's almost an Everest climb feat, what they've overcome to get here, and something that as a viewer, I've been so desperate to see, a relief that I've been desperate to feel, and like the warm and fuzzies that I think we all knew existed there, that they could achieve. I absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, am obsessed with this episode. The transformation of Ilya is bar none. The levity and childlike freedom and goofiness and authenticity that comes from them both risking emotional injury by being exposed to one another in the setting was unbelievable. The somewhat chaotic arc with Shane's parents, but even more so with Ilya being there physically present and a part of that experience was incredible. And all of the emotional turmoil and fear that I had throughout this entire season of like the ups and downs and one's ready, one's not. And, me reacting to more so, Shane's perspective and being confused and hurt by this man that he loves. And then seeing this like golden retriever version of Ilya, it's as if Jacob had the time and budget that a mainstream film had. And in fact, he had $6, 30 days, and no clear distribution pipeline for this thing that he brought to life with, of course, Rachel Reed's incredible words and world building. And it feels stupid to say, but there is no piece of media in my life that I have consumed that has affected me the way this has. And this is again coming from someone who's in their, officially late 30s, is out, has been for 15, 16 years, has had multiple relationships where I have brought them around family and people have been supportive, who is now married for 5 years and has an incredibly positive, like everything, work, family on my side, family on his side, friends, everyone is supportive. And even in that, there was healing I didn't know I needed to do. because of this show. It brought emotions to the surface that like I haven't conceptualized or even pretended existed for years, because part of, I guess, the way I healed from the coming out process was to like lock it away. And I am extremely hopeful that this is the catalyst for a series of new queer love stories that are positive, that don't end in disaster, that paint what I genuinely believe to be, at least in the US for now, the reality of what queer people experience as they discover themselves and they begin to date and they begin to do other things. I think I've mentioned in videos, I'm lucky enough to have 2 nieces and a nephew through my husband who are unbelievable human beings, and they're also early college, late high school. And I remember having conversations with them years ago about coming out, and in one of their friends was, struggling with it, but their approach to it was like, oh my God, who cares? Like, it's not a big deal at all. And that sentiment at that age group is so different than even the way I grew up. But the way I grew up is even so different than people, 20 years older than me. And many people who watch and comment on my videos are even, 50, 60, 70 years old. And I can't even imagine what this series feels like to them if it's this profound to me. But this season was unbelievable. You could not have capped it off better than with episode 6. I'm the only word that comes to mind is grateful. I'm just grateful that this exists. I'm just grateful that this show was handled the way it was written the way it was shot the way it was acted the way it was, is being handled the way it is by the team post-production, and that the world wrapped its arms around it and has made it this like cultural moment. The way that like we look back and think about, Jersey Shore or Stranger Things or, Game of Thrones, how like there was just a moment where all of a sudden the world wrapped around these premieres, these shows. That will be the same for Heated Rivalry, and incredibly well deserved. And I am practicing gratitude and not greed. And so I'm going to say, I can't wait for season 2 to come out next year. If I could have it tomorrow, I would be a very happy camper, but just unbelievable. And honestly, thank you to all of you that have come along for the ride. I've been doing YouTube for 12 years on and off. I've had a couple, big spike things, but the most consistent and enthusiastic group of people who have, blew some of my videos up are all of you Heated Rivalry fans. And this is my first time in any sort of a fandom, so I'm a little bit new. We had some stumbling blocks early on. We were trying to figure out show versus book and all that other stuff. But I really do appreciate all of you for tuning in. And I've been rambling for too long, so I'm going to wrap it up. But look forward to me diving into the books next. All right.